Welcome to Ask a Pastor, the place where we ask your burning questions about faith, life, and Jesus to a real live pastor. I'm joined here today by Pastor Luke Parker of the Spring Midtown Church. Luke, welcome.
Thanks. Yeah, it's good to be here.
Yeah, we're glad to have you. The question today goes like this. What is the best way to address or respond to someone who has just told you the news that they've been diagnosed with cancer?
Yeah. Well, I think the first thing is to just acknowledge that there is no best way, and to know that you're going to do the best you can. And there are better ways and there are worse ways. And so I think beginning just by listening, not just to the fact they have the diagnosis, but listening to where they're at emotionally. Probably they're grieving, my guess. And if they're grieving, let them grieve. Don't try to fix it. Don't try to fix them or make them feel a certain way or tell them that God's got a plan. Just listen. Allow them to grieve and to mourn. Jesus, in one of his most famous sermons, says, "Blessed are those who mourn." Paul will say, we mourn with those who mourn. It's our job as Christians to grieve with those who grieve. And likewise, Paul will also say, and we rejoice with those who rejoice. If there's somebody who's going through a cancer diagnosis and they seem in pretty decent spirits, it's not your job to make them cry, just like it's not your job to cheer them up. It's your job to listen and to be with them where they're at. And then the next step forward really is to take action, to be somebody who really does love and support them in this season. And one of the weird things about being Christians is the Bible will say that we're responsible for people beyond our inner circle, not just like our family and our friends, but you might have a neighbor who gets cancer, a coworker who gets cancer, and you'll hear it, and the temptation is to say, oh, I'll pray for you, and which is like a Christian way sometimes of saying, I'm sorry that happened. But if you really start to pray for them every morning and every night, you may actually see God do some amazing things. And likewise, you may see God do some amazing things in and through you as you pray for them and go, I've got to pray that you give them hope today. I pray that you just take care of their basic needs. And you go, I think I should make them dinner. God will actually use you to answer some of those prayer requests. You can be somebody who shows up at their house and just sits with them because they need a buddy, or drives them to the hospital when they need chemo, or listens and deals with some of the issues in their family, or brings your kids over just to take the burden off some nights, or is somebody who's willing to be with them in pain as they're throwing up next to a hospital bed, really tangibly getting involved in their pain and their sickness, and not being somebody who's uncomfortable with that.
Yeah, that's a good, I think, overview of a couple of the main steps that we as Christians have. The first, obviously, is to grieve and to mourn, to sit with those folks who are going through the emotions of something like this. But that grief also leads us to a second step of action. And it makes me think, and this is more just a question, I think, in general, across Christian history and across scriptural history, what are some examples you can think of healthy illustrations of what this looks like in a practical way?
Yeah, I mean, the story of Christianity is full of people caring for the sick and those in need and who are poor and immigrants and strangers and desperate. Catherine of Siena used to walk into the homes of people who had the plague and lay hands on them and pray for them, and then also deal with their actual needs when some religious people were moving out of town to try and avoid the plague. Christians throughout time have taken babies into their homes who've been abandoned, or really taking care of the sick. We invented the idea of hospitals. We would bring people into churches who were sick, or just create homes where people could be cared for. The thing about the Bible is there's also a lot of conversation about what it is to bring faith into action. The whole book of James really is about faith taking action. And so James at one point will say, I'm glad you have faith, that's great. I'd like to see it. I'd like you to see you do it. Jesus at one point tells a story to a guy who's like, what does it really mean to follow God? Like, what does it really mean to love my neighbor? And it's a Good Samaritan story, and it's actually the name of many hospitals for a reason. And it's a story that a lot of people know, that the religious people saw a guy in need, and maybe they prayed, and maybe they cared, but they didn't do anything. And there was another guy who threw a guy on a donkey and paid the hospital bills and took care of him, and really got involved in the mess and the difficulty of that situation. And there's not a formula for this. I mean, if people have cancer, they're going to go through a lot, and it's not going to be easy. It's going to be messy and hard. But the truth is, if you're somebody who shows up in their life, they're going to notice. There's a friend of mine some years back who just, honestly, she felt called to love somebody in her neighborhood. A neighbor down the road from her had gotten a cancer diagnosis. It was stage 4 ovarian cancer, and it was brutal. But her husband actually divorced her because he realized she wouldn't have kids and she wouldn't live very long, which is cold and cruel in many ways. And so she's just this hopeless woman who's now completely alone. And what a lot of people do in that situation, like, that's really sad, and then they go about their day-to-day lives. But my friend just felt this call from the Lord to love her, and so we began praying for her every day, and then would buy her groceries, would have her kids buy her groceries, would have her kids sit with her, she would sit with her when she was puking into 3 in the morning. Or it was just this consistent presence she had in this neighbor's life. And the neighbor didn't believe in Jesus. But over time, my friend became this person who would just talk about why she loved her and the God who had loved my friend, and why that just moved her to love richly and deeply and tangibly. And so it was this way of being a witness, but it wasn't the cheap, easy way of being a witness that some people are like, well, God has a plan and he loves you and heaven is real. And let me really show you what that looks like in a person's life. And let me really show it to you that I believe that by the way that I love you. I wouldn't make talking about Jesus the very first thing that you do. I'd bring that into everything else that you're doing.
Totally. And with the way that Christianity talks about faith leading to action, talking about Jesus many times means doing what Jesus did.
Showing
that's,
people
that's an
Jesus.
important thing.
Yeah, that's good.
And I think you hit on that again in the beginning of our talk. So yeah, no, I think that's a terrific overview of what it looks like here. Not to be the best necessarily, but to improve in how we can love our neighbor.
To be faithful, I think.
Yeah. Well said. Well, thank you for the submitted question. Thank you guys for continuing to submit these questions. We're always glad to talk about these things, so keep submitting them. These are crucial questions for what it means to follow Jesus in the modern world. But yeah, until next time, this has been Ask Pastor. See you guys. If you liked this video and you're interested in seeing more from the Spring Midtown, be sure to like and subscribe down below this video and follow us on our Instagram and Facebook pages. We'd love to get more connected with you. Thanks for watching.